Oh, yes, Roj.
Reverend Father Francis Xavier, the speaker of this evening, and all the fathers, sisters, and all those who are watching this webinar from different parts of the world. Hearty welcome to all of you and good evening. The art of spiritual conversation is something very special to St. Ignatius that he has handed over to his sons and daughters of the entire church, I would say. And here is Father Francis Xavier, who is well versed, and he is not only theoretically but in practice as the provincial, and he has wide experience in different parts of the globe. And without taking much of your time, I invite Father Francis Xavier, Doctor, to give us the art of spiritual conversation. Over to you, Father.
Thank you, Father Roj. I think you are able to see my screen. Good evening to you all. I'm very happy to be with you this evening. And I would like to share my views or my thinking on this, the art of spiritual conversation. As Father Roach has said in his introduction, it is something that was very dear to Father Ignatius and his first companions. In fact, most of the time they have been using this spiritual conversation for their deliberations. To give the summary of this talk, this spiritual conversation is mostly a listening conversation, listening to the Spirit of God speaking from the other, trying to see the world or reality of the other from his or her perspective or experience. Our experiences might be different, our perspectives might be different, but we gather to come to a consensus as much as possible to do the work of God. Therefore, this spiritual conversation is listening to God, speaking through the other. And it is more a listening rather than engaging in conversation to find common ground for understanding. From there, we take off for action-related mission. Therefore, what is important is to realize the resonating vibration with others. That's why we have to listen. Instead of concentrating what I have to say, how I have to argue, how I have to prove my point, listening to the other, what the other one has to say. And this is a process to find a solution. In other words, we can call it, this is a process of discernment in common. The predisposition is each one would come with his or her own discernment as a prerequisite. And here we do the discernment in common. Therefore, this is not a decision by majority, as we do in a political circle or in a corporate world, but it is by consensus. The contrast between ordinary conversation and this listening or spiritual conversation is this would be free from arguing one's case or trying to prove one's stand, and it is desisting oneself to attempt to convince the other of what I am thinking. Together, we are on a mission and we try to find meaning in that. Jesus said, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am. For spiritual conversation, when we meet in his name to do his work for his people, we try to find out what are we here to do as a group or as a congregation, as a province. It has got the triad of being, dynamism, and doing. Being is what you are, Doing is what we are going to do, and the dynamism is the spiritual conversation. So the first prerequisite is how I am, my being. That means, what is my attitude? Do I have the disposition to the people and the situation and to the issue that is at hand for us to discuss? And the dynamism is team building. Team building is facilitated by building relationship with others. In other words, how do we see together? This is the dynamism of the spiritual conversation. Once this is done, then we move on to the work or the mission or whatever goal we are there to accomplish. The means of doing this is the love of the other or understanding the other's perspectives and points. So the individual role is responsibleness. We may take responsibility later to do the work, but the responsibility is that we see and do together. We feel responsible for the mission entrusted to the group that is going to do that. So what matters is the we-ness, we together, how we are going to do our mission according to our way of proceeding. Each congregation or order has its own charism. How do we do according to our way of proceeding? This is what the first companions of Ignatius did, especially in Venice in the beginning when they are exploring the possibility of what is to be done together for the future. So now we come to that question, what is spiritual conversation? As I said, this is different from the regular conversation. Namely, it is more of listening. That means I should be open to the discussion. This discussion is among the equals. I should respect them as equals, that they also know as much as I know, perhaps more than I know. Therefore, I put myself into the common search to find meaning for my life and in the ministry that we are going to do. Therefore, we search in common to make the ministry more fruitful. It is not the individual that is going to do, but it is the group. And what is important is not accomplishing the work, but searching for the purpose. And what would be the modality of operation? It's not one man show or one woman show. How do we go about that? In this situation, our past experience would help us for the future way of proceeding, and in the present we are discussing. So we bring our past and we look into the future, and in the present we are listening to others how we are going to do, which will imply that we have to adapt our ideal concepts to the actual reality in mission. I may be idealist, or my idea may be idealistic, but the reality may be different. How do we put our experience together to meet the challenges according to the times, the signs of the times? So the outcome from the spiritual conversation is a deeper conviction of my vocation and also my mission that we are going to do. There should be better commitment to the mission entrusted, because we take up the responsibility together, we become responsible for the work. So it is my work as well as it is our mission. Therefore, it is the common search to find Jesus as the answer in the needs of the people. That is spiritual conversation. Now, Looking at Jesus, he also engaged himself very often in conversation. We read in the Acts of the Apostles, Philip was taken to meet the Ethiopian who was traveling, and he needed some conversation that is mostly textual clarification and understanding about the Messiah. That's one type of conversation. And second is Lazarus is sick, very sick, and Jesus is consulting his friends and apostles, shall we go or not? And you can see the apostles giving each one his own feelings, what he thinks. One says, right now, this is not the ideal time. The Jews were trying to kill you. Why do you want to put yourself in danger? Another one says, well, we are 10, 12 people here. We could safeguard ourselves. And this is the process is called making decisions. Jesus listens to the disciples, how they feel, how they look into the mission, and then he takes the decision. He says, let's go. And the another type of conversation is he is having this discussion or conversation with a Samaritan woman at the well of Jacob. This exchange of ideas. Jesus also tries to understand. For example, he is saying, you believe in one God, we too believe in one God. You believe that one God is in Zion, and we Samaritans believe that that one God is Mount Chorazim. So which God is the one God? There Jesus comes up with the universal truth. In spirit and truth you worship God, neither on this mountain nor at that mountain. Jesus is open to learn from others. He listened to the woman and he understands her, and the conversation is fruitful. And we find also another type, highly intellectual type, meeting Nicodemus at night. It's more of teaching, more of instruction. And so you can see different types of conversation. And what is common here is people are not arguing. People are not trying to stress what they mean right. They're not trying to argue that I am right, you are wrong. Rather, they listen. They listen to the people. So the dynamism in the spiritual conversation, or to put in the secular term, listening conversation, is openness to listen and readiness to exchange ideas, opinions, suggestions. And this will result in enhancing one's knowledge, and we grow not only in the understanding of the issue or of the people, we grow in harmony with others in doing the work together. And sometimes this conversation itself could be therapeutic, it could be miraculous, because as we have heard, sharing doubles your joy and halves your sorrow, because you know there is another one is there to understand you, to accept you. And the conversation very often would lead to bonding for teamwork. Suppose I see this team is very good, people are friendly, so I feel a kind of bond building and bonding, so I build a teamwork which might be lasting. And this conversation might open up myself to enlightenment. I may not seen the other aspects, but somebody brings in, it looks nice, then much better than my own idea. And it is a time where we can clarify our doubts and confusion, where we are able to see the issue or matter better. So this conversation, listening conversation, becomes a catalyst to understand and care for the other. And it is also an effective talisman to avoid misunderstanding. It lubricates your understanding instead of bringing in fire of controversy. And that respect, we are able to resonate with others, that becomes therapeutic for us. Listening also helps us feel for the other, and then we become the other in doing the work. Once we understand the other's point, we are ready to work with them in solidarity. And that way, the listening takes us through the doorstep of the other. As Ignatius would say, that you enter through the other's door, you can bring through your doors. Here it is mutual. You try to understand the other and you also share. What is important is try to understand more the other. So the outcome would be a feeling of belonging to others, a feeling that I am accepted in the group, and feeling that there is a mutual openness, there is construction of knowledge. And the saving factor is when I am sinking in the quicksand of confusion, others are there, they stretch out their hand and help me save myself. So the redeeming factor is even if I have doubt, I am able to clear it. Only thing is, I don't become very aggressive or self-assertive. Rather, I give myself to the conversation with others. So here there are two aspects. First of all, you listen. There is also possibility for your sharing. There should be inspirational sharing, not destructive sharing, and intensive listening, not superficial listening. So when you are sharing, you share your thoughts, your feelings, your experience based on your inner movement, not to belittle the other, not to put down the other, not to show that you are the smartest person. Rather, what is your inner movement that you share? And also make yourself free from vested interests. You don't have any more your personal interest to be achieved. You should be free from bias or prejudice. These are very, very important when you are going for this conversation because you should be open-minded and open-hearted. That brings you to the in-depth sharing, which becomes objective and constructive. At the same time, when you listen to others, you respect the experience of the others. Others' experience is as important as yours. So consider whatever others say non-judgmentally. Don't say, oh, I know this person is much junior to me, I am learned and senior. Not such things, even as we have read in the Bible, wisdom could come out of the mouth of the children. So one's sharing should not be labeled and should not be identified with the person. You don't look at the person, just listen to what the person is saying. And listen without any interruption, without any comments. Don't bring in, I agree or disagree. There is time for that, for your sharing. And this is not a discussion or argument, but mostly listening with openness, fairness, and involvement in the issue that is discussed. The outcome is that we seek resonance or common understanding in the issue. Now, look at what are the elements of spiritual conversation. It is a process. It's a process of seeking and finding. Nobody is going to bring to the table the solution. No solution is ready-made. We seek together. And in this common search, we become conscious of our own inner movements. At the same time, the movement of the Spirit within us, the Spirit of Jesus who is present in this group. So what is present within me and what is expressed with others have to synchronize. And also, we should be able to develop the art of speaking as well as the art of listening. For this, in the first place, as mentioned earlier, we need disposition. You have to come prepared. Prepared means openness, what Ignatius would call indifference. There may be more than one way of doing things. There may be more than one modality of operation, but I am indifferent to that. The second, we should have the discernment at two levels. My own discernment before going for the meeting, and during the meeting, the community deliberations are common discernment. The third one is the direction, that is the way forward. Normally that is taken care of by the community facilitator or animator or the superior. So here we communicate to others, and that goes through the administrative setup into action and periodic evaluation. This is the way Ignatius would do. You discern, you plan out, you do it, you evaluate. Your experience would get enriched. Once again, you repeat the same course of action. That is the way to go forward. And there is need for spiritual conversation. First of all, we need to build a capacity for deep and humble listening. Without this, if you are going to have to the meeting with preconceived ideas, you are not going to profit much. Neither is the sailing going to be smooth. Rather, deep and humble listening. And then discover the hidden presence of God in others. That's why you listen. Listen with humility. And don't impose your ideas or suggestions onto the others unless you are called for. Therefore, our experience and our expertise vary. The others' experience and expertise also might vary, but we have to start with what is common between our experience, start from there and extend the common area more and more so that we can do much better. So we come up with common understanding for effective ministry. So this is, in other words, an exercise to discern the will of God. It's not simply listening to the other, listening to God speaking through the other. And I synchronize my outlook with the others so that at the end of the day, we are able to have a common picture, not your picture or my picture, our picture of the ministry. So we resonate it with God's outlook in the context of the need of the people we serve. It is not my decision that is going to help the people or your decision going to help, how our decision is going to help the people we are going to serve. That should be the disposition. And now we come to how exactly we will be doing the conversation. So this is how we are going to start. So first of all, be clear about what is your life's mission. What is your experience? You may have less or more, whatever it is, be aware of that. Be aware of your own limitations or your richness of experience. And what is your prominent feeling on the issue at hand? That is, listen to the little inner voice that you have and your conscience, and maybe that is the voice of God. So keep in touch with that inner voice. And make sure that you are free from prejudice and bias. You should be on guard all the time. And also you try to look at what are the possible angles of consideration, how this could be viewed through the others. If you go prepared when others come up with different ideas, it won't be a surprise to you. And then, are you different? No problem, but we'll focus on the good of all involved in the ministry. And here we try to synchronize our rational consideration with our emotional understanding. Both have to go together. That's what Ignatius would say. When you are able to balance your head and heart, your hand would be enamored to do the work. And be prepared and be sensitive to find the finger of God pointing out during this conversation. And also have a discussion with yourself. How do you foresee the future journey? How do you how are you going to work with others? This is called the broken window theory. This is from New York Police Department. In a particular section of New York, where the crime rate was high, they saw a lot of windows broken and streets were not clean. And people said, this is a God-forsaken place. Let us not do anything for that. Till one fine day, when police officer came, I said, no, fix all the windows, clean all the road. And then they found out to their surprise, the crime rate was going down. Then they asked why. When you fix your window broken or keep the street clean, people will say, oh, people, the police here, they take note of everything, so we are in the good hands. So the confidence building should be there. So this would help us to do that, so that when we work with others, we see the wholeness and the beauty of the work, then we will be able to do our best. And we should be aware of certain don'ts and do's in the spiritual conversation. As much as possible, we can be aware of that. So I go parallel to that. It is not just a physical presence, rather be active. Your active engagement in deliberations and your listening, your interest will pay a high dividend. And don't go with the critical attitude or disposition. Oh, what are they going to achieve in this one? Instead, listen to God speaking through the other. And also, don't ignore or avoid the difficult or unpleasant truths or reality expressed by others. Your experience may be one thing, the other's experience may be other things. But under the world of the other, when he or she speaks from their perspectives, put yourself in his or her shoe and see his or her world as he or she sees that world. And here, no need of pretending that you understand all said. You may not. But feel free to ask for clarification when you are invited, not uninvited. And don't just keep quiet disinterestedly, but listen to the people with perception and understanding. And don't express there and then your disagreement, belittling the attitude of the other. Instead, practice gracefulness, gentleness, compassion, respect for the other, that others are as important as I am. So here, don't jump into discussion or argument to prove your point, but try to understand. Instead of asking why, ask why not. There is the way of doing that. So understand the good in others saying, this will facilitate the conversation. Now, there are 3 rounds of conversation, levels of conversation in the art of spiritual conversation. As a preparation, you feel the presence of God. Remember that Jesus saying, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am. And notice and recognize the presence of others who are also coming there with experience. And be aware of the proposition of issue and hand. Have clear and precise knowledge about what you are going to discuss. Otherwise, you will be beating around the bush. So the first level would be affective sharing. Each one begins to share the personal reflection, and perhaps you can note down the points of the reflection, and you listen from the other's perspective, especially their body language. So no simultaneous defense or counter argument. So the first round goes and spend some time interiorizing what the person has said, how much you find common ground with the person, how much you are able to synchronize with the person. Then the second round is you are able to share your reflections. This is the second level, second round of spiritual conversation. You share your reflection. And first of all, you can say, I agree with so and I too feel the same. So your inner movement is expressing your goodness to see the good in others. You might ask a clarification, just a clarification, not argument or discussion, which would enhance your understanding. So, as you are sharing, when others are sharing, reflectively internalize. Maybe a prayerful reflection, say, seeing how God would feel in your place, or how God would like you to feel what others are saying. So, this is the second round. Then we go to the third level. This is called the discursive sharing, where the actually little discussion comes in, no argument. Here we capitulate what has happened in your sharing, in your listening, and try to enumerate the good and practical points from others. And you can offer your alternatives with reasons for. Again, it's not argument. I feel this may be good. And look for consensus pointers from the others. And don't look for the safe solution, but look for right solution. It's not, don't think this solution will be acceptable to many. No, what is the right solution as it is inspired within you? So this discernment process helps you capture the movement of the heart during the conversation. That's why you should be, on the one hand, listening to the other, at the same time, keep in touch with what is happening within you. So the movement within your heart also will synchronize that. It is like the Emmaus disciples when they were on the way, as Jesus was talking, when they were listening, they said their hearts were burning. This should be our experience. We are on a spiritual journey towards the goal of the mission. The other is talking. My heart, whether it is synchronizing, whether it is burning with zeal to work for the good of the mission. So this is resulting in the emergence of consensus or alternatives. At the end, what is important is, do you feel serene? Do you have inner peace? Does the group feel the same serenity and peaceful? The inner peace is the one that is going to be the deciding factor about the quality of the spiritual conversation that we have done. And we could enhance the spiritual conversation through a few points that we could think of. So take all efforts to keep up cordial conversation, gentleness, listening to others, acknowledging what they are worth, and also take efforts to take note of genuine points and try to reinforce with others. For example, you can say, yeah, my experience also is the same, and I can understand. When someone expressed the difficulty, I do understand I had the same difficulty. So this would be from the genuine listening. You feel like listening more. You don't get bored of that because you put yourself into the frequency range of the person or in the mood of the other person. And feel free to give credit to others' experience when it makes sense to you, when it is meaningful to you. At the same time, readily accept at certain points your inability or your ignorance about an ignorance. If you don't know, you don't know. There is nothing wrong in telling others, could you clarify, I am ignorant of this point. There's nothing wrong in that. After all, we are as equals sitting in the common discernment process. And this building up cordial affection right from the beginning and building up bonding will help us to break down the wall of resistance from others. Then we would be able to see the other's point better. So this development of attitude As I mentioned earlier, when you go in, your attitude is very important. During the conversation, your attitude should become enhanced for the better. At the end also, your attitude should grow more in appreciation of the others and their output. You should have the attitude, 4 eyes see better than 2. So here also we start exploring the common space at starting point. As you see the two circles, one is blue, another is pink or magenta. So one may be my circle, the other may be other circle. So look at the blue's intermediary circle, and that common space I locate, I recognize, start working from there. And then try to expand this interface between the two circles. And you can put more circles, another circle you can put on the top. So whatever is the common point, you start working at it. Then we build up our common understanding, our common strategy, and then our sharing of the work. That will be the way to go in our spiritual conversation. So what would be the outcome of the spiritual conversation? First of all, clarity. Clarity about this work, cura apostolica. How much it becomes clear to us to do the work better. We should be able to see that this work should be as clear as possible in details. And the second outcome is a deeper understanding of people, myself in the light of others' understanding and others in the light of my understanding. This is called cura personalis. Understand others, and then you will be able to do work. That leads you better appreciation of others. We tend to trust others more. The fellow religious or companions in mission, or sometimes it could be extended to our co-workers who are working with us in the ministry. And this would also help us to contextualize, because my background, experience, and knowledge may be different. The others, the context might be different. But when we put all together on the table and looking at the need of the people and the time, and we see the contextualization becomes clear, and the discernment in common helps us get a clear vision and clearer path to walk towards the goal. So the conversation actually opens up our mindfulness of understanding others, accepting others. So there is a conviction that God has spoken through the others, and I am going to work with others for the greater glory of God in the greater service of the needy. I'm not going to be alone, but I am going to work with others. And there is a synchronization, my views with other views. So the conviction of God's enlightenment is the vertical relationship, and my synchronization with my fellow sojourners is the horizontal relationship. So both way it gets strengthened, and the resonance is vertical resonance and horizontal resonance. Then the group discernment helps us to get a clear idea of the ministry. And then we come with the parameters. That is a practical way of doing it, how the individual and collective way of doing it once we have this inner peace and harmony. Within me, the peace, with others, harmony, and that leads to the ministry of Magis to do the best that we could do. And once the spiritual conversation is over, there is still follow-up has to take place. This may be what is the exercise of making the decision. You are having in a group or a community, you are discussing For example, whether we should open up a new institution or we should venture into a new area of ministry, whatever it is. So this spiritual conversation is the first step or first phase of making the decision. Then the superior or the facilitator or the animator takes the decision. He or she might have another consultation with the so-called consult or counselors, and that is taking the decisions. So this deliberation may be at the province level or consult level or even congregation level, that is under higher level, and taking into consideration the superior's two things, forum internum and forum externum. That means there are certain confidential things, especially when it comes to the individuals, that cannot be discussed. But the forum externum, what is externally could be observed or taken care of, that could be coming for the discussion part of it or deliberation point of it. So ultimately, when it comes to the mission, the leader's work or mission is to choose the right person, to assign in the right place at the right time with right work. So this is the mission of the leader. Here, one takes care of the person and one takes care of the mission. At the same time, what is important is after choosing the person to go to a place for a particular work, accompaniment is very important. For the superior or the facilitator, constant correspondence with the people is very important. Sometimes the facilitator or the people and the power, they try to show that they are very busy, they don't have time to reply, but that is not the main issue. What is important is how much time you are spending with others. Arupe once said, you should waste quality time with God. It also extended, you should waste quality time with the people. The waste is not real waste. Even if you consider it's a waste, the quality time is for the people. That is accompaniment. Very often, when the people feel that my facilitator or animator walks with me, that gives great joy and comfort. And another area of this one is ongoing formation. I remember the day when we finished our novitiate and we were moving across the corridor to the juniorate. The last meeting we had with the novice master, he said, my dear novices, don't think the novitiate is over. Lifelong novitiate begins today. The same thing my doctoral guide told me the day I defended my thesis when I was leaving USA. He said, Francis, what you got is only a license. It is like getting driver's license to drive a car. Before you get the driver's license, someone sits with you to give direction. Now you can drive. So don't think you have finished your research. This is only a beginning. Don't ever leave research. So this is that accompaniment. He has been accompanying me till he died a few years ago. So this ongoing formation, there is a lot of things to learn, especially during this time of pandemic, where we don't know what this corona is about. You are talking about it is attacking 60 plus, then it started attacking 45 plus, now it is going attacking 18 plus. Now we are talking about this fungus. So what is what? So we have to keep learning. There is nothing that you learn is going to be a waste. For this, the leader should be a model. It's not mere giving instruction to the people. It's not mere making sure that it is implemented. You should be a model. People should learn from you, not only from what you say, but how you live out. So you have to show the way by living it out. That is applicable to us also. when we are in a ministry area where we are working with the people, people have to learn from us, not merely what we say and do, how do we live. That is one of the outcome from the what we learn from others during the spiritual conversation. And another thing is very important is communication and confirmation. There should be clear communication to all concerned. Ignatius says, when the provincial is sending person on a mission, he says, as much as possible, put it in writing clearly what you expect the person to do that. Don't simply say, go there, and the fellow will be confused about that. And whatever it is, this documentation in general, in most of our religious congregation is lacking. You are going to have a problem after 15 years, you go and see no document would be there. So instead, make it very clear all the documentation. For example, archives for every province or even every house is very important. So communication, preserving the communication, clarity in direction is another outcome of the spiritual conversation. And one thing is timeline with long-term and short-term goals. This is another thing that the leaders of the community should do. And to practice what is the outcome of the spiritual conversation, the commanding chain and the reporting chain should be very clear. The organogram should be very clear. Who gives direction to whom and who reports to whom? If it is not clear, you are going to have confusion. Somebody is going to be aggressive or somebody is going to feel bad. So this organogram and the job descriptions are very important. That gives you the next important thing, documentation. Any process, any progress should be properly documented, and periodically there should be evaluation. This is very Ignatian way of doing. Ignatius says that you should be able to examine your conscience twice a day. We call it examination of consciousness. How conscious you have been with the people you are working, how conscious you have been the work you have been doing with. So at least once a day. What for? And you have monthly recollections, and once a year you have a retreat. The purpose is evaluate my daily life in the examination of consciousness, my monthly life in the recollection, my annual life in the retreat. It is called, in other words, course correction. Ignatius would try to put it, what I wanted to do last year, and what have I done? Where did I want to go and where have I gone? So I need course correction to be done. So this is a constant evaluation of what I am doing. That is very, very important. So this course correction sometimes would need revisiting our mission. Sometimes just because we have started doesn't mean we should keep on. When it has served the purpose, when it has become a white elephant, let us have the humility to revisit it if necessary to wind it up. So that courage we should be able to have. For this, a communication from the top, a reminder often about what we do, at the same time, a report to the top, and the documentation would help. Constantly, we have to go back. What was the original idea of the founder of an institution or a founder of a particular movement? Whether it has served the purpose or whether we have gone too far from that, how do you come back? When we need to have a change, then we come back to the table and have again spiritual conversation and rethink, rework, and react, reevaluate. So it is a constant cyclic process where we are doing that. And it should have the conformity between the charism and context. Our charism was one thing. Our context may be different. So our reference point is the charism of the group or the congregation. Sometimes the present context might change, possible, but what is the modality we adapt for operations? For example, in the Ignatius and first companions, when they were thinking what can we do for the people, they put generic norm, care of the soul. So they thought care of the soul means only spiritual ministry, preaching, teaching catechism, and explaining the word of God. Then they said, well, there is another aspect of the person, intellectual. So then they started opening up the schools because Ignatius thought at the time of Luther, then people should be able to think for themselves. Then they realized it is not mere the spiritual or intellectual. Man is having a body also, and he need economical help, uplift. So they started economic program. And then they said the politically also they should be powerful. At that time, the colonization started in the 15th, 16th century in South America, and the slaves were traded, and the Jesuits said, no, they are also human beings. And it was not accepted. So they started the Jesuit republics in about 31 colonies, and they also bought slaves, but told them, you are free, let us work in cooperative basis. The political struggle or political freedom started there. From there it started, it is called the ripple effect. Then that was one of the problem for the Jesuits. The Jesuit order has to be suppressed. That also had the repercussion in the French revolutions. This political awareness that was given. And later we started this human dignity. We started looking at the roots in the 60s, especially after the General Congregation 32. We started revisiting the original vision of the founder, option for the poor, and that was interpreted in India. In the North India, the preferential option for the tribals. In the South India, preferential option for the Dalits. And in the US, it will be preferential option for the Hispanics and the colored people. So it goes depending on the context of the people. So as you see, care of the soul today encompasses physical, intellectual, economic, political, dignity, equality. And recently, the 36th General Congregation has said the other aspect is the triple reconciliation. Reconciliation with God, with fellow human beings, and the nature, our common home. This also is very much reflected in Laudato Si, and Pope also very much taking the lead on this one. So ultimately, what do we realize from our charism in our context is an appreciation of the world that God has created. Hopkins would sing, the world is charged with the grandeur of God, and I'm invited to serve this world. And Irenaeus would say, God's glory is human being fully alive. I'm a religious to work for that fullness of people. That fullness could be economic, intellectual, political, liberation, and their leadership, but I have to work for that. And Ignatius would say, your salvation is the salvation of the people. You are not going to go to God alone. Everyone is created in the image and likeness of God. If at all we go to God, we have to go together. So march with the migrants or march with the marginalized. That is your salvation. As you see, Father Stan, because he took a stand, today he is there, but he will have the victory and his cause will have the purpose served. So there I would like to end with this quotation. This is very often used, this philosophy of Nietzsche by Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, his experience in 4 concentration camps. The book was written in 9 consecutive days, And so far, 9 million copies have been sold. This is the central theme is this. I think it is applicable to us also. It says, if the why of the mission is clear, then the how of the mission is easier. So in the spiritual conversation, we try to understand the mission and why we should do the mission. And we also discuss the how of the mission, and it is the animator or the superior who tell us how to do the thing. So it is, in other words, listening to God speaking in others, synchronizing my experience and my feeling with others, finding the common goal and working together to reach that end. This is the summary of the spiritual conversation or listening conversation. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, I'll try to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father, for the excellent talk. We have a lot of appreciation both in the Zoom and YouTube also. Dear friends, please post your questions either in the Zoom or YouTube. By then, I will read out some of the appreciation, Father. Appreciation to you, Father, for your continuous efforts to make us informative and aware of the new things. Excellent clarity with the scriptural depth and roots of Ignatian tradition. Thank you so much, Father. Very excellent presentation. Lovely presentation with full of rich insights and spiritual conversation in today's context. Thank you, Father Francis Xavier.
Thank you, Father Roach.
Yes. Now we have got a question, Father.
Yeah.
Dear Father Francis, how can we introduce spiritual conversation in an interreligious context, for example, in our educational institutions? With this approach work effectively? That's a question from Melvin Lobo.
Yeah, that's as I mentioned in the beginning. If you replace spiritual conversation by listening conversation, the rest, most of the things would go as it is. Actually, I have sent an article for publication that is called Listening Conversation. So once you know what the ministry is, or you follow all the steps, for example, you be prepared, you don't have prejudice, you don't sideline or criticize anyone, listen to the people, share your things, try to find out what is common. From there, you start building, then the administration will find out how we would be able to do the work. So exactly the same. Only thing in the spiritual conversation, we try to very often make ourselves feel the presence of God and the religious charism and all. But in the secular world, we try to find out the ministry, what we are doing. Is that okay?
Yes, Father, I think you have answered. Lot of appreciation, Father. Not many questions. I think things are very clear. Anyone in the Zoom also, you can raise a question directly also to Father. You have the privilege. Wonderful presentation, Father, taking us back to the Jesuit heritage with the futuristic mode. These are some of the appreciation I have, Father. I'm reading.
Thank you.
This is only appreciation, Father Francis. Hearty congratulations. It was really inspiring us as a Jesuit. So I want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Arul.
Father, we have got a question, Father. Is it possible to adapt this method in a secular context? That's from Francis de Souza.
Yeah, very much. As I answered to the previous talk, it's very much, it could be even taken for the corporate world. In fact, as I mentioned, I have put the same thing in the listening conversation. The mission is the same, and how we are going to do, how the people we are going to work, how do you understand? The understanding is very important. And how do I understand if I don't agree with your insight and your experience? There will be constant constraint between us. We may disagree in ideology, no problem about that. But at least if I know where we agree, where we come together, where we have the common idea, start from there. So this is, I showed the Venn diagram when two circles overlap. Start from there. You can put another circle. How many people are there? What is this? First of all, the question is, are we convinced of doing this work? The second is, are we convinced of the modality of operation? And what is the timeline? Who does what? And then come periodic evaluation. We may not going to do all the things in one day. I very often remember what John F. Kennedy said on the day of his inauguration. We have a lot of plans and ideas. It may not be done in the first 100 days of this administration. It may not be done in the first 1,000 days of this administration. It may not be done even in our lifetime. But what is important is that we have begun. So that is important. The spiritual conversation gives you the propelling spirit to take off. And when you take off, you know how to land, where to land, who is the pilot, who gives the direction. That is what we do either in the spiritual conversation or in the administrative conversation or in the corporate conversation. It's the same. The matrix is the same. Then how do you put the flesh and the decoration is different.
Yes, Father, this is very clear.
May I ask something?
Yeah, please, please, Father, please post your
thank you very much, Father Francis. It was very clear and insightful. My curiosity is that this spiritual conversation, if I am not mistaken, last 5-6 years, it has become very loud and often talked about. So it has been a part and parcel of our first fathers. What happened that we did not think about it earlier? How suddenly 5, 6 or 10 years back it has come? So any historical account of it?
Father Lawrence, I'm happy to see you after meeting you many years ago in Sri Lanka.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps you can give us more insight from your Buddhist expectation or experience. Certain things, as we take off and we might go off the tangent. It happen. For example, I give you one example. Ignatius started the school and announced education free. People were laughing at him when education was available only to the feudal lords and the royal families. He was ready to offer for free. But what happened later as the Jesuits excelled in education, as the Ratio Studiorum came by, Jesuit education institution became institutions for the elite. And in fact, I read a paper that was written in the 15th, 16th century that when the princes and the sons of the feudal lords came to the classroom, each one had a little small table for themselves. All of the students had benches. So at that time itself, some Jesuits were raising the question, this is not the spirit of Ignatius. But what happened, it took maybe 400 years or 450. Then we started in the 1960s. We said, we go back to the root. That is the preferential option for the poor. So at some point, that is why it's called the course correction. We started moving and then we tend to go. And what is important is finally, we have started going back to the root, going back to the charism in our context. So I am happy about that. So I'm happy that we have come back to our original spirit. Only thing is we should practice it, live it out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father. You got another question from Renuka Zakaria. Father Francis, could you please clarify the difference between communal discernment and spiritual conversation?
Both would complement each other. In fact, you start with a spiritual conversation. It is how you share your experience and your knowledge. And the discernment is what is happening within you. How do you resonate? One is what you listen to, what is being spoken. Other one is you are keeping in touch with the movement within you. So this, I would, in my understanding, is the spiritual conversation is the conversation with the people. And the discernment is with the spirit that is moving within me. When these two complement each other and synchronize, you resonate and you come out with the point to go ahead.
Thank you, Father. Another question from Emily Joseph. How far is it possible to practice the art of spiritual conversation in the daily hymndom of the life as a leader of a community?
In the daily, if you think that spiritual conversation is only in the community meeting, daily may not be possible. But rather, I would say if the superior, as I said, is available to the people, that itself is a great thing. Listen to the people. Very often, in my own experience, you listen at the end of the meeting, people don't even wait for your advice. In today's world where we are running around, we are very busy, we don't have people to listen to. We don't have people who can sit with me and listen. And I think the superior's work is that. The superior is in the place of a father or mother, whatever you call it. Listen to the people, and then because listening is therapeutic. For the one who listens, you understand the person better, and the one who pours out, he feels better after pouring out. For that, we need today's world. We have a lot of communication gadgets, but very little communication. You spend 2 hours, 3 hours in the WhatsApp and so many internet, but you don't have time to sit and talk with people 5 minutes when somebody wants to come. Very often I have heard very often people saying in spiritual, in the religious congregation, I'm not able to meet my superior doesn't have time, or my major superior doesn't even reply my email. This is the constant thing. My thing is, I remember when I was appointed provincial, I happened to be with Father General for the Progress congregation. He said, I have appointed you. At that time, till that time, there was a vice provincial that was abolished. And I told Father General, I am too young, I am 46. My province is too big, 504 at that time. And you are abolishing the vice provincial. How do you expect me to do the work? He said, Father Francis, your work is visitation. Your job number one is visitation. The visitation is where the provincial goes and meets people. You spend time with the people. For other works, you can delegate. So you have this PCF, he can take care of the other works. You have the commission coordinators, they can do work. Your thing is what we call the manifestation of conscience. That is your job number one. So in my opinion, superior is 24/7 for the people. The work you can delegate. Suppose you have an institution, just to give direction to the institution head, institution will go ahead. So the superior's room is kind of a control room where a communication tower, where you give direction, be available to the people. So that is my way of looking at daily basis, how you do people, be there with the people.
Thank you, Father. Last two questions maybe of this evening. This is from Andhra Provincial. Being attached to one's own spiritual practice and faith does affect the spiritual conversation by the members in a group? Is it a pitfall? If so, how to overcome such pitfalls? That's question number one, Father. Second one is, I think, from a scholastic Lawrence. He has a concern how to include scholastics or those men in formation, or maybe we can extend to women in formation to take part in the process, orients towards the fruits more than the communal discernment.
Okay. Thank you, Father Stan, for your question. All of us are unique. And, you are an expert in the computer world. There is a lot of algorithms are there. Python is having one algorithm, and but you are an expert in that. But all things work together, right? So you may have your own uniqueness, your own conviction, your own way of your spiritual life. But when we come together, we are talking about the common work, not individual work. What is the work? As I always say, the vocation is given to individual. God calls each one as individual. He doesn't call a group. But the work is given to a community, to a group. So we are talking about the work in a group. So what is common in our context, in our charism, that how we can work together, that is the spiritual conversation comes. My personal things may be different. I may be more devoted to Sacred Heart, another one may be devoted more to Marian devotion, but that doesn't come here. And this is the work that we do. And I don't see any contradiction or conflict in this one. Regarding the question from the scholastic, I don't make a distinction between a scholastic and a priest and a formed priest and brother or sister. They're all human beings and we build together. I always tell my scholastics, one scholastic is sitting right in front of me, I tell them that we are all equal in the religious order. So all should be involved in that. In our community meeting, all take part, all have the right to speak. So for example, to answer your question, in the formation, I'm suppose you were consulted recently in our Madurai or Chennai province, they had the province meet online. There is a committee appointed, they discuss, they consult. So you have your chance to express. I think very much the spiritual conversation could be brought down to that. Or you have the deacons or the people in Subham, that is the supervised pastoral ministry. They also meet once a month. At all levels you can have. So this is not only to the elite group. Wherever you are having a discussion, the spiritual conversation brings in the element that your inner conviction helps you to understand the others, and both put together, you plan out to do your common work. So it is feasible, it is possible, and it should be done.
Thank you, Father. Now over to Vasant, who will raise the last question of this evening. Vasant, the PDD of Chennai.
Father Francis, thank you for the wonderful presentation, especially connecting the spiritual conversation with the present context, how we can use it in the present context. I have two questions, clarifications. Since spiritual conversation involves the inner movement of a person, so what is the place of a silent prayer or a time for prayer in the process? That's the first question. And second, last few years we have been following this, and when we are practicing this again and again, there may be a tendency, I know what is spiritual conversation. So sometimes I have that. How to have a right disposition to approach this process. Sometimes when that kind of thinking comes, or how to approach this process. The second question. Thank you.
Father, I will add two more, Father, from the chat box. After all the discussion, how can we confirm that this is according to the plan of God? That is one question. Then during this pandemic, faith in God or spiritual conversation is $1 million question. As we watch and read many about death of priests, nuns, and people who are looked for their goodness, how do we revive this spiritual conversation in a community? I think with this, we can go further.
Okay. Always Jesuit is accommodative. Vasant said one question, Roach said one question, Vasant came with 2 questions, and another one comes with 2 more questions. Okay, this is the spirit of spiritual conversation. Be accommodative whenever there is need. Now, to touch upon the first question of Father Vasant, the inner movement and what is the role of the silence is very simple. You listen to others. When you have the silent prayer, you internalize it and you integrate it. So that is the purpose of silence. And the silent prayer, you see eye to eye with the person. In the regular conversation, your tendency is to argue and overpower the other person. Whereas here, the silent prayer, you try to see, because there is also movement on the spirit, you see how do you internalize it and how do you integrate. The second one is, you say that if you are having it very often the spiritual conversation, then you may get bored. It depends on you yourself have answered your question. Much depends on the disposition. Last month, I read a book. It's called Ichigo Ichi. It's a Japanese thing, which says now or never. So no 2 days are alike. And when you meet the person that Ichigo Ichi says, meet the person as though you are not going to meet the person again. So each moment, each incident in your life, each meeting may not come. And that is very much true now. The other question that is brought in the context of deaths of the people. So people today, for example, the Father Paikanathan, the administrator of Sivaganga Diocese, passed away. So totally unexpected. And last Monday, my good friend Father Rajaratnam died, just 62. On the 10th, one of my mentor and guide, Father Antony Raj, is a social activist and movement leader, died. How to understand this? And recently, someone said there is about 180 plus priests have died in India the last 1 month, and 165 plus sisters and other religious have died. How do you explain that? It is the way of God. Only thing is we do our part. We take care of the precautions, and most of the time we see that people who have mostly died have got comorbidities. But having said and explained what we have to see, try to understand where God is leading us. There are certain things which is not clear to us. That's why Cardinal Newman would say, it is dark, the home is far away, be my light, one step enough for me. So let us live one day by day. There are a lot of things in life we may not be able to answer, but we can try. And answering the other question, what is the outcome of this? What is the guarantee or criteria for the inner, the outcome of the inner, the spiritual conversation is inner peace and serenity. I remember that one of my students' son, he was in the 5th grade, he wanted me to go with him to the Kung Fu film. You know, the Kung Fu, that Kung Fu will make a lot of mistakes and he get beaten up. He comes to the master. The master will say, have inner peace. You have always have inner peace. Nobody will defeat you. So that is the thing, the outcome of this. Ignatius also says, when you do your spiritual conversation, when you have the round of spiritual exercises, sit and reflect for a moment whether there is peace, serenity, inner peace. I find that whenever we have the province congregation, we are supposed to meet once in 4 years, or when we have even the general congregation, when all the business is done, the provincial or the general will ask, is there anyone want to say? And everybody has to say, and he will ask, what is your inner movement right now? Each one has to say, I am very peaceful. The process is very nice. I feel comfortable. So that is the outcome or sign of a spiritual conversation has been effective. So inner peace and serenity and peace of mind.
Thank you so much, Father. With the sentiments of so many expressing their gratitudes, I also joined them for your precise, very clear, and then scientific way of presenting this art of spiritual conversation. I'm sure this introduction of the spiritual conversation will be a great help to our family, to our community, to our team, and the province, and maybe the congregation level to do the discernment in common. And we experienced that your spiritual conversation with religion and science, that was very much vivid with your apt examples, and we have really benefited a lot. And thank you so much, Father. We also thank Mr. Sam for his technical assistance in streaming this in the YouTube. Thank you so much, and have a very happy and healthy evening and the days to come. God bless you.
Thank you, Father Roach, for moderating effectively this session. I want to thank Professor Sampson and Scholastic Zenith and our Minister Justin for making all these arrangements for this Zoom meeting. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your presence, for your clarifications. I'm very grateful to you. I'm very happy to see a lot of my friends here. And thank you very much. Let us walk together. And especially let us pray together, especially for the people who have been affected and who have gone to the Lord after this COVID-19. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.